and welcome back to the Art Biz, where we dive deep into the business of being an artist, sharing inspiring stories and actionable insights from artists and art professionals. I'm Alyson Stanfield, and my mission on this show, as well as in all of my classes and coaching programs at Art Biz Success, is to help you elevate your art career, amplify your visibility, and connect your art to the people who matter most. If you're looking for strategies to grow your art business, market your work effectively, and take control of your career, you're in the right place. My guest today takes us outside the art world and into the world of internet search. Do not go anywhere because I promise you will want to know this. You need to know this. Meg Casebolt is my go-to SEO coach. So that we're on the same page here, SEO is short for search engine optimization. After 20 years of creating content for my blog and podcast, Meg helped me untangle the digital mess behind the scenes and gave me the clarity and confidence to move forward with more intention. Now, I know SEO isn't exactly the sexiest topic, but Meg has a knack for making it practical, understandable, and dare I say, kind of fun? Kind of like figuring out a puzzle. In this episode, we talk about what it really means to own your content. And spoiler alert, your Instagram feed does not count. We also talk about how search engines work and how to use that knowledge to get more eyeballs on your art. Simple strategies you could start today for optimizing your images and pages without compromising your creative soul. And bonus, why blogging is still relevant and how it might actually serve you more than the algorithm, if it's something you want to stick with. And because Meg is also a romance novelist, yes, she really is, you know this conversation is going to be anything but dry. Here's my conversation with Meg Casebolt. Hi, Meg. Welcome to the Art Biz.
I am so excited to be here with you today, Alyson. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm delighted to introduce my audience to my SEO coach that I worked with so long ago. I so love everything that you do.
Thank you.
And wish I could keep up with my SEO. That you have such good stuff that I'm excited, and you go beyond SEO. So that's kind of where I want to start. In one of your recent emails, you wrote, "Now more than ever, it's really important to create content that you own and control, instead of relying on somebody else's platform and hoping that they don't change their algorithm." So just to make sure that we're on the same page, what do you mean by content that you own and control?
Typically, this looks like you have your own website. That's not the only way to do it, but that's the easiest way to explain it is, if you, and since we're talking to artists, I'll give some visual options. If you're like, I get all of my sales from Instagram, and then Instagram decides to change from a square grid to a 4x5 grid, or Instagram, not that would ever happen, right? Hypothetically.
Why would they ever give up the square?
Hypothetically, if you build your entire feed a certain way and then Instagram goes, oh, we're emphasizing video. No, we're actually going to do reels. Stories don't matter as much, right? Like these algorithm shifts are completely out of your control as a creator. And so if you are relying on someone else to create the rules, then you are then at the mercy of those decision-making choices. And we are seeing, you and I, Alyson, are recording this in April 2025. And in January, Meta just went, no, we're not going to curate anything anymore. We're not going to support these types of things anymore, right? Like, so all of these things are constantly in flux. And the same is true for algorithms like YouTube, for algorithms like Google, for search platforms, ChatGPT. All of those places are changing all the time. So you can still benefit from all of those marketing strategies if it makes sense for your audience. But your home base, the place where you should be investing your time, is something that you own. Is your website, probably, whether that's, a Shopify shop where you're able to sell your work, or a WordPress site, a Squarespace site. There are so many different options. And then you can still be on, art platforms. You can still have, we're talking to artists, so you can still be on Etsy if you want to be on Etsy. But Etsy just raised their prices again. So maybe not all of your sales need to come from Etsy. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about here, is you can diversify your marketing, but at the core of it, the two things that you own are your website and your email list.
Yes. You are singing my song. I'm so glad to have you on this. I'm saying that all the time, not necessarily on this podcast, but to my students. And it's, God, I mean, you wouldn't turn your whole career, your whole show over to someone else to do with whatever they want. So why do that with your digital art?
Yeah, whether you're online or you're in person, you wouldn't put all of your exhibits into one gallery. You wouldn't, even if you have an agent, you wouldn't expect your agent to do all of the sales for you. Anytime that you put all of your eggs in one basket, you have the potential. Am I allowed to swear on this? You have the potential to be screwed.
So what should we do instead?
Well, I think one of the things that we were just talking about is diversifying, is figuring out what are the platforms that your audience is looking to find you on, and figuring out what it is that they want from those. The other thing is to be very clear about who you're trying to sell to and what the object is that those people are trying to achieve. Because there are plenty of collectors out there who say, I just want art, but they don't necessarily go seeking artwork. They don't necessarily know what it is that they're looking for. They might just say, oh, if I like it, I'll buy it, right? So we have to be clear about what is the reason why this person is making the decision, whether they're going and searching or they're stumbling upon you on some sort of platform. Like, what is the call? What is the value that you bring to your art that would be a siren song for people, that would make them want to purchase from you, to subscribe to your email list, to support you in some way, to be the patron of the arts, are the people that you're trying to serve, and where are they hanging out?
Yeah. Yeah. So that brings us to, so that's the platforms, that's diversifying your platforms, always taking care of your home base and that space that you own, that you want to send people to and say, this is how I want you to see my work, not how Meta wants you to see my work, not how Pinterest wants you to see my work. This is how I want you to see my work. And so that brings us to SEO. And so for those who have never heard that term before, SEO is search engine optimization. And so could you give us a basic definition of what SEO does and why we should care?
Sure. So we'll start with what is a search engine. Google is a search engine. Pinterest is a search engine. Amazon's a search engine. Etsy's a search engine. Anywhere that you can go in and type in, I am looking for this thing. TikTok's a search engine, right? Like, I'm looking
YouTube.
YouTube is the second biggest search engine on the planet, and it's owned by Google. So that's a huge one. I should have put that in there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where you're listening to this, is probably a search engine. And so search engines are places where you can go type in a phrase. As a consumer, you can go type in a phrase and you can find results that hopefully will match in relevance to what it is that you're looking for. Search engine optimization is creating some sort of strategy in your marketing, in your content, so that your site or your work is what shows up in those search results. Whether the search engine that you're trying to be found for is Google or Bing or YouTube or Amazon, right? Figuring out what it is that your ideal client is looking for, so that you can prepare in advance to show up in those search results for those specific terms.
Gotcha. Well, I hope that we get to how we figure that out. And maybe just now is a good time. Can you give us an example of how that might work for an artist?
So I think that the way that people search is different from the way that they scroll. If people are just on Pinterest, and they've said before that they like photos of dawn, sunset photos, just making things up here, then Pinterest is going to continue to show them sunset photos. And because they've liked that a couple of times, Pinterest is going to then change the algorithm so that they see a lot more sunset photos. And the term there would be sunset photography, right? If people are looking for it, that's what's going to show up. So you have that idea of if people are looking for this term, then this is what will show up in their feed. And the algorithm then also sort of says, if you like this, you might also like sunset photos, or you might also like photos, right? And so it can sort of expand out in that way. And so when people are scrolling, they've given that robot some idea of what it is that they're looking for, even if it's just swiping left and right on TikTok. And then the robot provides that information. And so people can sort of go through it mindlessly. They can sort of just like doom scroll a little bit. With search engine optimization, it's a much more active seeking process. So it would be somebody going into a place like TikTok or Google or YouTube and saying, sunset photography of Aurora, New York, over a hill that was taken in the winter. And, like you can, and I want it to be this print size. I'm actually thinking of a cousin of mine who does photography. Write that down, right? And so in that case, you can get much more detailed, and people usually are much more specific in those searches because there's something that there's a problem that they need to solve or a query that they have that is detailed enough and urgent enough that they're going to go seek it out. They're not just going to wait for it to come to them. They're going to seek it out. And so for that cousin of mine that just came to mind, he's actually a painter and he lives in Aurora, New York. That's why I said that. Maybe he would say Finger Lakes paintings, church in Finger Lakes, New York. So it doesn't necessarily have to be his town. It doesn't necessarily have to be the time of day. But by being clear about what is the object in his painting, he can then be found for people who are looking for Finger Lakes photos, Finger Lakes paintings. And by being specific about what it is that he has created, my cousin Bob can then show up in those search results. And if it has things that he realizes, oh, people are always looking for pictures of boats on Canisius Lake. Great. I'm going to go use that information, knowing that people are searching for it. I'm going to do more paintings of boats, right? So it can go both ways. It can be if you're inspired and you want to create something, then you can be clear about what is in your art, what is the descriptor of your art that people might be looking for. And you can use that information to generate new artwork that is tapping into what the market is asking for.
Gotcha. So I hope I'm not getting too far afield here, but if you said in your description, you can be, and so I think we're going to get into that with meta information, the other meta information, but does that work also in social media descriptions?
It depends.
Okay.
And I am not an expert on social media descriptions, so I'm not going to answer that question too clearly. It depends on the specific platform that you're on. It depends on the type of search that people are doing. Are they in the app or are they expecting things to show up on social media in search results? Social media to be a little bit lower in search results than more direct answers to things. So if my cousin Bob has an Instagram account and he has his website and people are looking for Finger Lakes paintings, then hopefully his website would show up and his Instagram would show up because he has that consistent messaging and language around what it is that he does. But because these algorithms are always changing, I'm not going to talk about hashtag strategy because I don't want to learn hashtag strategy, Alyson. But I can say, name the photo, Finger Lakes photo, right? And name those products in don't call it like Serenity. Unless that's part of your marketing strategy and you have a lot of people who are already following you and you can be less clear and more creative. But if you're trying to be found in search results, you have to be descriptive, you have to be specific, and you have to be clear.
Right. So there are artists who don't want to be that specific because they don't want, it might be a painting of the Finger Lakes, but they don't care if people mistake it for like Austin in Texas, or, I mean, I don't know, but I know that that's an issue with some of my people. So you need to know that, but there's a difference in titling it and using meta data or descriptions. Can we just talk about that on the website? Is that a good place to go now?
Sure, I'll go anywhere. Even if you have a painting called Serenity, you can still call it Serenity, but then have a subtitle that says, this is a blue and red painting of boats that is 36 inches by 24 inches oil on canvas, right? You can still put that information into a subtitle, into a description, into a category. You can organize your website so that people who are looking for boat pictures can go to that category page. People who are looking for oil versus looking for watercolor. There are ways that you can make it so even if you want to have a more creative way of naming your artwork, or if you're an abstract artist and you don't want to even tell people what was inspiring you in that piece, okay. But you can describe your materials, you can describe the themes, you can describe the tone, you can describe the size, right? What is it that people would be searching for? And also, like, what is the reason that they need this? So it could be that somebody is making a new mental health clinic and they want really calm, serene photos to put on their walls from local artists, but they don't necessarily need to know what's in them. Maybe they want it to be abstract so that way they get like a little Rorschach test in their waiting room. Great. But let's say that they want it to be local and they want it to look good on the wall of their clinic. They're like, turquoise painting, Austin, Texas. They know what they're looking for, but they have some information that can start that search, that can start them going down those rabbit holes.
Hi, Alyson, hopping in here with a quick reminder that your online presence matters a lot. As Meg and I are discussing, it's not enough to rely on social media platforms that can change on a whim. You need to take control of your content, your website, and your marketing. That is exactly what we're going to be working on in the upcoming season of Essentials, my premier art marketing and business building program for committed artists. Essentials gives you the structure, strategies, and support to grow your visibility, elevate your professionalism, and build a business that sustains your studio practice. We're going to kick things off with the Artist's Content Compass. It's a planning workshop happening May 6th through the 8th before diving into flourishing online. You'll build a content structure and schedule, show up with more intention and clarity, and learn how to repurpose your content to save time and increase visibility. If you're ready to be more intentional about your art business and how you show up online, I would love to support you inside my Essentials program. Check it out. All the details are at artbizsuccess.com/essentials. That's artbizsuccess.com/essentials. Now back to my conversation with Meg Casebolt. And so are we talking about text that is visible on a page or text that is in the metadata behind the scenes?
Both. I don't often use the term metadata because and let me explain why. It used to be like 10, 15 years ago that there was just a field that was like, put all words here. And there is still a little bit of that on YouTube where it's like, what are the list of keywords that you want to be found for? But what I like to point to people out instead of saying metadata is it's your alt text, especially for our artists. It's your alt text. The alt text is what shows up on the page if that image doesn't load. Or what if Google can't see these images yet? I say yet because, AI.
Yes.
Google can't see these images yet, but if you say, your alt text says photo of boat Canisius Lake, New York, then Google knows that that is a photo of a boat in Canisius Lake, New York. Alt text, I want to say for an accessibility reason, is also used for people who are using screen readers or any sort of visual aids. So you don't want to just shove as much information as you can in there because it's going to really have the user experience decrease in quality. So just a description of if I were to show you that's a photo of my wedding and I could say, Vegas wedding rooftop bridegroom, that's not nearly as easy for somebody who's hearing it read out loud as 2019 Las Vegas wedding on a rooftop deck overlooking the strip, right? Like you can add some information in there, but the point is, if somebody was looking for that image in Google Images, what would they type in? Put that as your alt text.
But what you said, the second thing that you said was a almost complete sentence, maybe without the verb, but
Mhm.
it was a complete thought that made sense together, not like a list of thoughts that might go together
Yeah, I like to think of it as like a
somehow.
caption or a
Yeah.
description sometimes, where it's like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you said to me, "What's in that picture?" I wouldn't be like, "Bridegroom sky." I have a child with a communication disorder, so I'm very accustomed to sentence fragments, but that's not how Google expects us to talk. So why not just describe
Yeah.
things the way that you would describe them without feeling like you have to shove all this information into these specific places, but recognize that people are looking in phrases. People are using
Yeah.
language to look this information up. So use the language that you think your potential client would be searching for.
Is there a certain length that we're looking at for alt text?
I don't know what the best practice is on that. I can get back to you.
Got it.
I think a lot of it
No,
is,
that's okay.
what the experience that you want people to have with the alt text. And especially with artists, you often have multiple images of the same thing. So it's like, how is each of these images different? Or which of these
Right.
images is the one that you would want to show up in the Google image search results? And emphasize that one. You don't need to like optimize every single piece of everything on your website.
So when you're talking about optimizing an image, you're talking about using alt text in it in the description. And you said also on the page that is visible to people as well.
Yeah, so the words on the page, the images and their alt text, the image title. I'm talking more about images here because we're talking to artists, but then the description can do some of the work. And if you choose to blog, and I know you and I didn't put on this rabbit hole for a while.
We're gonna go there. We're gonna go there.
If
Yeah,
you choose
that's
to
fine.
blog, then you can include more information in that blog as well. But here's something that I see a lot from people who are starting to think about SEO, and maybe they're using an SEO plugin that tells them, oh, you have to put the same phrase in all of these places. You don't have to include the exact same phrase, word for word, in 17 different places on the page if it sounds awkward. That's a very
Oh,
old school SEO technique. It's nice sometimes to have a checklist that says like, oh, don't forget to write your SEO title and don't forget to update your alt text. But one of the things that Google prefers to see is, yes, you can include the same phrase multiple places to say, that's what this is about. That's what this page is about. But it also wants to see relevant terms. It wants to see related terms on the page. So you don't just have to repeat the same thing over and over again and shove it into all the places. You kind of show that you have value and that you know more about the work.
just to be clear, because if we get nothing else from this conversation, I think this is really important. When artists upload an image to their website, should alt tags be with every image?
Every image that you think is valuable to your people. And that's where I come back strategically to, what do you think people would be searching for? And what would they search for in Google Images? And that's the question I like to ask people is, if you were looking for this image, first of all, does anybody know enough about this to be looking for this image?
Right. Yes.
Second of all, if you were looking for this image, what would you search for?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great questions. And I will say that artists are not always the best to answer those questions of their own work.
Yeah.
I think maybe Google it yourself and see what you come up with, and then ask other people too what could be useful.
Ask
Yeah.
maybe your ideal client or a potential client how they would describe your
Yeah.
work. Because
Yeah.
you are an expert and you have this curse of knowledge where you're like, oh, I use this very fancy technique. And me as a non-artist would be like, silly. Like, look, it's Vincent Van Gogh's Starry Night. It's super swirly and it's very bright and blue. And yeah, and it wouldn't be me saying, here's the exact type that it is. It would be, wow, that's really, like, it's very calm and it makes me sleepy. Those are not,
Yeah.
that's not the language that the artist would use, but that's the language the consumer might
Yeah.
use. So that's a really good point, Alyson, to say, like, go get voice of customer research. Say, how would you describe this?
I think that's brilliant. So, are there any first steps or basic steps that we haven't covered already about SEO that artists should know?
I think one of the key pieces is that not everything on your website has to be perfectly optimized for search. So if you do have some products that are Oh, most people come and they find me for my handmade engraved black and white pottery. And then once they get to the site, they realize that I also have birds. I also make handmade birds, but nobody knows that they're looking for handmade birds. But once they see my handmade birds, they want to buy my handmade birds. You don't have to be found for the handmade birds if nobody knows they want them.
Right.
You can get people
Right.
to find you for the thing that is sort of, I like to call it an on-ramp. What is the thing that people would be searching for that you do? And then once they get to your website,
Okay.
it's your website's job to say, look at birds.
We love the birds. All right. So we do need to talk just briefly about blogs, because when I was working with you, I was trying to wrangle my blog, which has been around for more than 20 years and has so much content. And so it was just super helpful to figure those things out. As I told you before we started recording, I used to teach blogging to artists. In fact, I remember the day when I had to spell the word blog in a live workshop on numerous occasions. What are you talking about? And so I know a lot of artists, because of me in the aughts, started blogs and were not able to keep them up. And so I want to know, for SEO, are blogs important these days?
They can be. I don't want to make a definitive, yes, every artist should blog.
Yeah.
The way that I like to have people think about blogs is, what is the additional information that people might need about your work or your process that they cannot get from an image description or from a product description? What are they curious about? What myths can you help them to understand? What obstacles are in your sales cycle? What use cases are there?
I've got one. The other reason to have a blog, is because you don't mind working out your thoughts and processes in public, because it helps you in the thinking process. I think that's the number one reason to have a blog, is for yourself. Like, this is how I work.
And that is such an
Yeah.
artist's approach to blogging. Whereas I am like, what are the things that people want to know so they can buy from you? You know, and
Yeah.
I think also, like, blogs can be really helpful for, Alyson bought my piece of art because she wanted something for her foyer. You know, like, sort of telling these stories.
Social proof.
Exactly. Social
Too.
proof, or what are the frequently asked questions that people have about your work? Maybe it can be a page of your website. It can be an FAQ page, or you can say, like, hey, here's what my packing and delivery process looks like to make sure that your art gets to you in a safe way, right? You can answer
Yeah.
questions and overcome sales objections on that page, instead of feeling like you have to go back and forth on email with people 1,000 times to answer the same questions.
Yes. Yes. So can we bottom line this? Because I have a couple more questions
Sure.
before I let you go. Bottom line, what I tell artists is they should blog if they like to write and they want to write consistently, because I know that it's mostly not for SEO, but I know the artists that have a blog and don't write consistently are self-flagellating. I mean, they just beat themselves up because they haven't updated their blog and blah, blah, blah. So I always tell artists, blog if you want to write and share it with people. It doesn't have to be 1,000 words, or some of my posts are over 3,000 words. It doesn't have to be that. It just, like, if you do it for yourself and you can do it consistently and you enjoy it,
I
to blog.
agree with parts
Because
of that. I don't
yeah,
think it needs to be as consistent as it once did. I think as long as you take the date off of your blog so people can't see it,
yeah,
unless it is time sensitive, which it usually isn't, as long as they're still relevant. So I think it's less about, frequency of posting, to say, you have to write a blog post every month or something, but more like, I would say, figure out what are the topics that people would want to hear from you, that can help them get to know you as an artist, that can help them make an educated choice about the sales. And then maybe you write 10 blog posts and you're like, that's it, I'm done. Great. As long as they're things that people are looking for, The frequency is not as important of a factor as it used to be.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. Or what I intended to say. It's not the frequency for the search engines that I'm concerned about. It's the artists beating themselves up because they haven't posted recently. That's the main thing that I have witnessed from my artists who have blogs.
Yeah.
They just get really frustrated because they haven't. I need to blog. I haven't posted in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a lot of pressure. But you're right. Take the date off.
And I would say also it's more important to me to have one really great blog than to have 5 mediocre blogs. Maybe you feel differently because you're doing
blog posts. You mean blog posts?
Yeah, I mean blog
say
posts.
That? Yeah. Okay.
Maybe you would feel differently because there is some kind of artistic processing that you're using when you're guiding artists through it. But I would say I'd rather see one, 1,500 word blog post that's like, here's a day in the life, or here's how I chose my materials, or here's a use case of my work, instead of 5 300 word blogs that are like, I drank a cup of coffee today. I don't care.
Please don't do that. Yeah, we used to use blogs. We used to use blogs like we use social media now. So, to post events and so forth. But if you're going to do that, why have a blog? Why don't just make a new page on your about page to do that? Okay. So, because to me, blogs mean that they're updated, but that may be my old thinking. I would call it something different. I would call it articles or something.
Yeah.
If I did that, I wouldn't call it a blog. If it's updated regularly, I want to see the word blog on there because I know that's where I go to see the latest. If it's not updated regularly, you can call it articles or writing or something like that.
I don't know if I have ever clicked on the word blog on a website in my life.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
really,
in my opinion, blogs, I will search a website to find a bit of information. So if you have a search bar on your website and I'm like, I want to find out more about this. But really, I think about blogs as a way to show up in search results, something that you can share where that can be the first point of contact that people have with you, and a way that you can introduce people to what it is that you believe. And then they can link between other blogs and go down the rabbit hole based on where you're sending them. But very rarely do I expect people to click on the blog and look at the date and go, I'm going to read this from newest to oldest. I just don't think that that's how behavior is anymore. So, yeah.
No, but yeah. Okay, so just real quick before you go, can we talk about analytics or tracking or anything that artists should be concerned about in terms of tracking their metrics?
So there's 2 ways to think about your analytics when it comes to SEO, when it comes to the work that I do on your website, we'll say. The first is, how do people find it? And the second is, once they've found it, how do they interact with your website or your content? So if you have a lot of Squarespace people, right?
I do have a lot of Squarespace people.
Okay. So if you're on WordPress, you may need to install some of these things yourself. If you're on a tool like Squarespace, Wix, Shopify, some of these tools are integrated into your software. So if you are on Squarespace and you go to your Squarespace analytics page, you might have some of this information right there. If you want to have third-party tracking going on, Google has a tool called Google Search Console that is free, that doesn't have any cookies, and it will say to you, here's everything that you might be showing up for in the search results. But a lot of these tools that are on your website, like Squarespace Analytics, has the site search terms. That's the same idea, or search queries. I can't remember if it's terms or queries. But this idea of part 1, phase 1, how do people find you? What are the terms that they're searching for? Whether you find that in Google Search Console or in your analytics dashboard, what are the phrases that your website is showing up in search for? And how many of those people are actually clicking to get to your website? For those people who see you in search or find you on social or are on your email list and then get to your website, then a lot of the analytics are, well, what do they do once they get there? And that can be, how long do they stay on the page? What pages do they go to? What page do they start on? How many other pages do they visit? Do they actually fill out a form? You can get all of that information from the moment that they put in a search term until they leave your website or they buy something. And the benefit of having this information is that if things are going well, you can replicate those experiences and say, oh, people who are searching for this particular type of product are more likely to buy the first time. So let me put more of those products on, or let me make sure that those product pages or those categories have the descriptions in place so that way I'm showing up for those search terms. You can also find where there are problems of, oh, people who come to my about page are more likely to buy if they land on my about page than people who find me through my homepage. So maybe there's something that I can change about my homepage that makes people more likely to stay here longer, more likely to click to a second page, more likely to go check out my products, right? Like, so seeing how that behavior works can help you replicate good behavior and solve problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So are there any one of those things that you look at more than others? Like what am I trying to say? Page views or duration of visit? Is there any one of those things that you tend to favor?
No, because I think it does tend
Just
to be
look
a
at them all.
pretty holistic. I mean, I would say
Yeah.
I would be curious about what's the first thing that people see. So that would be your landing page. How many people are
Mhm.
coming into each of those landing pages? I would be
Yeah.
curious about, based on where they start, how long are they spending on the site? Whether
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
pages per visit or time per visit. Then, I think sometimes people look at these averages of like, on average, people spend 1 minute on your site. And you're like, well, what's the point? But again, it's an average. There are going to be people and they're on and off your website in 1 second and they're going to drive down your averages. But there are also going to be people who are on there for 10 minutes and they're ready to make a purchase. So instead of looking at averages, I like to tell people to look at trends to see how behavior is. What are people doing and how is that behavior changing?
Over time.
Mm-hmm.
Over time. How often do you suggest people look at their analytics?
Every like 3 to 6 months.
Okay. Okay. That's doable.
Yeah, some
That's
people are
totally
like, well,
doable.
things went down this week. And I'm like, well, it's school break. Like there's so many things that can change.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. By the time this airs, you will have just started Content Love Lab. What is it and who is that for?
So Content Love Lab is a membership program that I have where people can learn how to do their own keyword research from me and implement it on their website with support. Because I think there are a lot of SEO programs out there that are just like, well, go watch these YouTube videos and then figure it out. And SEO is such a ever-changing, nuanced strategy that it's not fair to ask people to do it. If they can get support, I'd love to give it to
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
because every business model is a little different and every geographic area is a little different, the advice that I would give to you is different than the advice that I would give to your artist because you're working online
Yeah.
and you are providing a leverage service versus they are creating, and they may want to go into more local marketplaces and tap into craft fairs. And those search terms are different and those search strategies are different. And so Content Love Lab is a way that I can teach people how to think about search and give feedback that is customized to, okay, Alyson, here's what you should do. And Jamie should do this instead. And then while you're going and doing that, tell me how it's going and I'll give you feedback on what's working. And we'll go look at your Google Search Console together. And I'll review, share your product page and I'll say, oh, have you thought about doing this? Right. And sometimes you just need that third-party support to do it.
Oh, yeah.
So content.
It was so helpful. Yeah. When I did an earlier iteration of, it sounds like a similar thing.
Yeah.
And it was so helpful to have that support. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to say you went through the program when it was under a different name and I just
Yeah.
rebranded it. But the concept, I have clients who have freaked out because it's like, well, February was dead. And I'm like, February is a shorter month. Especially if you're comparing February to March, you have 10% more time in March. So I think sometimes we can get a little bit fixated on these little adjustments. Oh, and this February had more weekends than this February and people don't travel. There's so many things that can change. So I like to recommend year-over-year adjustments to look at things and say, how does this February compare to last February? Or knowing some of your seasonal shifts. I have a lot of clients who summer is dead for them. Okay, then yeah, your numbers are going to go down, but they're going to go back up. So knowing what to expect over time is what I mean with these trends versus getting concerned about things that are either common or completely out of your control. Concept is the same, which is learn how to do it with support from somebody who's been doing it for a decade.
Yeah. Hugely helpful. So if someone listens to this later, can they still join?
Yeah, so we run it on an ongoing basis. You can join whenever it makes sense. All of our trainings are recorded. I run the trainings live 2 times a year. I run them from April to June, and I run them again from September to November, because that way things are constantly updated and I can adjust the trainings based on who is in the room with me. So if I were to get a bunch of artists, I would update the slides to be like, let's talk about artists. And if there's no artists, it doesn't make sense to put that in the slides. I make those adjustments, but all of those videos are always recorded. I'm always doing feedback for people. I'm always doing, office hours if I'm not doing live training. So it's still a space that can be helpful to people regardless of when they join the program. I just like to run it live twice a year.
Yeah. Great. Yes. It's more fun that way,
It
I
is.
think. What is the URL for that for people to join?
Yep. So you guys can all come over to loveatfirstsearch.com, and all the information is there about if you want to learn how to do SEO with me or if you just want me to tell you what to do. Those are basically the 2 ways that I work with people.
Fantastic. And we cannot let you go without you mentioning your podcasts.
Okay. So I have a podcast. It is called Aggressively Human. You can find it on all the podcast players, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you're listening to this podcast, you can find it. I co-host that with a friend of mine who's a business strategist, and we are always talking about how to bring more humanity into your business and your marketing, especially because, it's 2025 and AI is everywhere. And we have all these algorithms that we're fighting against, and everything is supposed to be automated all the time. And we just both, my co-host Jessica and I both had a point where we said, but what makes it human?
Yeah.
And what are some things we can do in our businesses, even if it's just conversations like this, Alyson, where it's like, we have worked together before. Let's hop on a call and talk about it with human voices and human experiences and human examples versus go watch a YouTube video and sit alone in a closet and cry.
That's true. That's true. And you have to mention your other podcast too.
Oh, sure. So I am also
because you're human.
I'm a human.
Because you're well-rounded human.
Because I don't think everything in your life needs to be done to monetize your business. I am also a romance novelist. My second romance novel is coming out in May. And so I write under the pen name Bailey Seaborn. And then I also have a podcast about romance novels that I run with a friend of mine who is an operations specialist. She also runs an online business. We met at a live event and ended up talking about romance novels. And we have now been podcasting on the First Dates and Soulmates podcast for over a year. Because it's fun. You can just have fun.
Do you use your name on that one, or do you use your pen name on that?
For the podcast, I use my name. For the books, I use a pen name because I'd already written a business book under my name, and I thought it would be too confusing to the Amazon algorithm if I was like, oh, here is my brand. And my brand is very much SEO. So I didn't want to have my own reputation management problems in SEO by saying that. But I think it's okay on the podcast.
Yeah, I love it. Meg, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. This is as we know, this is a rabbit hole, and we've just scratched the surface. But the basic thing is to get those words up there and so that you can be found. So, and own your site, own your content,
own your own work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Alyson. I really appreciate it.
After hearing Meg's insights, I challenge you to take just one step to strengthen your online presence. That might mean updating the alt text on the last 10 images you uploaded to your website, or revising an artwork or page description, or finally writing that blog post you've been thinking about. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be something. The goal is to start showing up more clearly for the people who are looking for you and your art. If the idea of managing your content and marketing with more intention feels overwhelming, you don't know where to start, you don't have to figure it out all alone. I would love to support you inside Essentials for Artist Success, my comprehensive program for artists who are ready to get serious about their businesses, or who already are serious about their businesses. We have it all. We kick things off soon with the Artist's Content Compass. It's a planning workshop to help you set a calendar, schedules, strategies, and categories so that you know your content for now and the future. See all of the details at artbizsuccess.com/essentials. Let me know what step you are taking by tagging me on Instagram. I'm at Alyson Stanfield, and use the hashtag ArtBizSuccess so I can cheer you on. To read the show notes for this episode, visit artbizpodcast.com and look for episode 222. Thank you for listening and allowing me to be part of your artist journey.